Season 4 is upon us, and that means a rank reset and a clean slate to reach new heights in ranked. I get questions all the time on the topic of how you can rank up fast in the game, so let's cover the mental and practical components that go into pushing yourself to that next level. But before we do, if you want a free 30-day trial of consistent coach scrims and classes to bring you to the next level, I have a link you can use to the Gosu Academy I work at down below, and let's get into the video. Now, the first thing that you have to get right about ranked is the way you approach the playlist and all of the mental components that go into climbing. Starting off, the way you will be successful in ranked is if you adopt a mindset that is all about focusing on improvement rather than the number on your screen that goes up and down after a win or a loss. When you see your rank placement at the start of the season, it can be very discouraging and feel like you are only getting worse, but I promise you that is not the case. The PNG that indicates that you are platinum doesn't really mean anything. It is the percentage of players you climb to that matters, so every single time you make it to a new rank early on in the season, you should always aim to see a higher percentage to gauge your improvement over time rather than the rank itself. So long as you're putting time into the game and are consistently trying to work on something specific every single game, you are going to have a much easier time climbing. One loss is not going to set you back in plat if you are pushing yourself to become a GM player. It is only a matter of time before you become so good that you end up in the next rank. This brings us into the next point, EOMM. In other words, engagement optimized matchmaking. Now, I know the devs are saying things like, oh, EOMM doesn't exist, but let's get real here, guys. You don't know that, I don't know that, and to be honest, I can't really trust the devs with a system that is this controversial. Whether it exists though or not doesn't really matter, because if you want to have an iron mental to really lock in and climb in ranked, you have to play as though it doesn't really exist. You are going to win games and lose games in ranked. That's just how it is. It is what you do with the losses that matters. Improving is something you can gain out of every single game, and that is the true win here. Sometimes though, you're just gonna go on unlucky streaks, and there are actually ways to avoid having some bad games. Oftentimes, players will instantly queue right after they lose a game out of pure rage, only to get matched up against the same players that they just got dunked on by. Then what happens is that these types of players are going to blame EOMM for their loss when they just queued into another unfortunate matchup. There are ways to get around this though. If you notice that there are a lot of really strong players in your lobby that are kind of smurfing the game down no matter what team they are on, it could be worth it to just kind of wait until they find a game before you hop into your own game queue. You can actually track this after a match by remembering the key names that you want to focus on avoiding and looking through the recent players tab until they are in a new competitive match. Another situation is that if you find that you are getting banned a lot or are playing against characters that are really bad for your characters. For example, if you're a Groot player and have been playing into a Wolverine player and a Punisher player for the last 3 games, it might be worth it for you to reset your queue so you have an easier time playing your designated character. It can feel impossible to win, but this is because the enemies are using this next strategy I'm about to tell you against you. Remember to use the avoid function, not just to avoid bad teammates, but also to set up favorable matchups for your own characters. So for example, if I'm a Wolverine player and I just had a Groot one trick on my team, even if that Groot one trick's pretty good, sometimes I avoid the Groot just so I can keep playing against the Groot as Wolverine here. If you recognize that you had a player in the lobby that was a one trick character, you can avoid them and then either ban them out or play specific characters to hard counter them. Just to review, for example, if the enemies have a BP one trick, you can avoid him and then re-queue immediately while continuously playing Ultron, who is a very good BP counter with triple support, to farm a couple of games of free elo. Most of the time, EOMM is not actually the reason why you are losing. You are just getting farmed by the system, and the other players are gaming that system better than you, and you're blissfully unaware of that. Hero shooters in general are just very streaky games because games are found so fast and are often made up of similar players from game to game, since players are just insta-queuing at most ranks. Be aware of the players in the lobby and set yourself up for success. And if you lose 2 or 3 in a row, just get off for the day to avoid tilting, and maybe even VOD review your own gameplay. If you want to learn how to VOD review your own games better, I can possibly make a video for that. Just let me know in the comments down below so that I can gauge some interest. The final mental tip I have for you guys in Ranked is when should you start playing Ranked? In other words, what should your queue behavior be at the start of the season? A lot of people say that they like to wait a week or two to start playing Ranked, but this is actually a really bad idea if you want to climb. You should instead start playing day one a new patch comes out if possible, especially if you were bronze to platinum elo at the start of the season. This is because the longer the season goes on, the more Smurfs are going to be populating your games in these elos. At the same time, the start of the season is the lowest stakes environment where you're going to get an opportunity to play against higher level players than what you usually play against. Remember, Ranked is not about seeing the funny number go up next to your name. It is about improvement. So use the first 2 weeks in the season to learn the new meta, how characters work with each other on the new patch, and skyrocket your growth as a player. Then in the final 2 weeks of a season, that's when you can really lock in and go for your climb. All right, but let's move on to the practical tips that were actually going to be helping you a lot moving on to season 4. No matter what role you play, guys, we really have to start warming up before we play the game. I know you're rolling your eyes at me right now, but even 5 minutes is enough to set you ahead of the other players that you're going to be playing against in Ranked. I suggest going into the practice range and setting up the bots in a way that you're going to be practicing against different meta characters and their hitboxes. If you absolutely can't do this though because you think it's too boring, and honestly I don't blame you, Doom matches or conquest modes are always a great option too, but with how people play those game modes, it's kinda troll most of the time and you don't really get good practice. I do think the practice range is honestly the best option, it's just really boring. Moving on, let's talk about who to play and how you should lock in characters in general. The absolute worst thing you can do in Ranked if you want to consistently climb is to fill every single game. Pick a character, preferably a strong one, and insta-lock them every single game. I know it sounds kind of toxic, but look guys, Ranked is about improvements. And how are you going to improve at a kit and the game in general if you only get to play your designated character once per session because you lose 2 times or tilt before you get another game in? In terms of who you should pick, look guys, I'm all for having fun, but do not pick a D or an F tier character and expect to climb in a game like Marvel Rivals. This game is all about ultimate economy and how those ults interact, and some characters are just going to be weak season to season. If you really want to reach the top, pick an S tier character. In season 3.5, this looked like Phoenix or Psylocke for DPS, Emma and Mag for tank, and Luna Snow and Loki for support. Watch their guides on the channel and then lock in and improve. As for what picks I think will be the best in season 4, I do have a couple of videos cooking for that, so be on the lookout for those to release in the coming weeks. The other nice thing about having 2 S tier characters you can play in any given role is that rarely will you run into any situations where you actually get hard countered and have to swap, making things much more simple to just lock your character in and get really strong and just start climbing. Once you have your character locked, the next most important step is figuring out how your ultimate affects the ultimate economy of the rest of the team and the game in general. There are 3 types of ultimates in Marvel Rivals in my opinion: ones that save your team, ones that eliminate enemy support ultimates, and ones that force out enemy support ultimates. Some ultimates can do even more than one of these roles too. For example, most support ultimates save your team, like Luna Snow's or Cloak and Dagger's ultimate. Ultimates that eliminate enemy support ultimates are like Iron Man and even Phoenix and Namor when comboed with the perfect damage boost. Finally, ultimates that force out support ultimates are like Storms, Blades, and even Squirrel Girls. These ultimates typically charge quickly and get ripped frequently. An ultimate like Magneto's though is flexible since it can be used to take out enemy support ultimates, but also can be used to save his team against other specific threats. The same goes for a lot of tank ultimates, like Emma's and even Strange and Groot if you use them in specific ways. Once you know what your ultimate is capable of, you must then plan out how you are going to use it based on what the enemy has. If you are trying to play Storm in your ranked games, this could look like ulting early in the fight to force out a support ult, then giving your support the opportunity to ult second or hold it if the team can survive, creating an advantage for your team, since you're probably going to be able to charge your next Storm ultimate while teams are trading support ultimates. But if you are on the flip side and your support ult got forced out early, what can you do? If you are on Iron Man, you can assume that the enemies are going to respond with their own support ultimate if you pressure them. Then, if you have yours, you should be ready to find that enemy support and blast them with your ultimate, immediately turning the fight. Now lock in, if you are really good and are on Magneto, you would see this whole ultimate change happening from the beginning of the fight and and get ready to then intercept the enemy Iron Man ult, later taking out the enemy support ultimate that was online, or at the very least, get ready to shield the Iron Man ultimate. When characters are very capable of charging their ultimates every single fight, understanding how these abilities work and how to counter or play against them are crucial, no matter what character you're playing. For the final tip of the video, I wanted to save this one for the higher level players. Characters in hero shooters usually fall into one of 3 different categories: brawl heroes, dive heroes, and spam or poke characters. Brawl heroes like to get up close and personal and take teams down quickly. Thing is a very good example of a brawler. Dive heroes like to surround the enemies while forcing out cooldowns before going in for an execute. Psylocke is a very good example of a diver. Spam or poke heroes like to sit on varying angles to take the enemies down before they close the distance on them and take them out. Hela is a very good example of a spam or poke character. The difference about rivals from other hero shooters, though, is that almost every hero in the game wears many different hats and can be played in a lot of different compositions. For example, Phoenix can brawl out with the team, but she can also be slotted into dive compositions to support the dive from different angles, completing the circle around the enemy team. Psylocke can start on a flank, but then she's gonna dash back into main where she can then brawl out with her team. Magneto can brawl at close range with his bubbles or support divers with bubbles as well. The point I am trying to make is that if you play your character the same way every single game, you are going to lose a lot of games as a result at the higher levels. How you play a hero needs to change based on the context of the game. In this case, the tempo of your team, the enemies, and the match in general. Let's say that I'm a Phoenix player. The way I play with a Thing and a Mag is very different from how I play with a Captain America and a Venom. With a Thing and a Mag, I will likely start fights in main to spread stacks on the enemy team before later taking an off angle to finish off the fight. With Venom and Captain America, I will likely be off angling early in the fight in a position that I can take out supports as they try to run away from my dive to take them out, possibly stunning them early on in the fight too. This goes in the opposite direction too. If I'm playing a support like Luna Snow, I need to play further away from my tanks if the enemies have brawlers like the Thing, but need to play very close to my tanks if the enemies have divers like Venom and Captain America. Once you have a basic understanding of what all of the characters do and how they want to play, you can inform yourself of how to use every single one of your cooldowns and how to position yourself accordingly depending on the game and the situation. Most players are not quite ready for this though, which is why I wanted to save it for the later part of the video. Far and away the most important habits to really rank up is to lock in and warm up before you play, and then promote your understanding of ultimates in the game. Tempo is the final piece of the puzzle once you truly understand the nuance of every single character in the game. Before we go though, let's just have a quick review of how you need to be playing ranked in order to push your limits. First, it's super important that we lock in the mental. We gotta focus on improvement and come to terms with the fact that we are going to be losing games sometimes when we play ranked, no matter how good of a player we are. Second, for mental, we really do have to avoid tilt after 2 losses, and if you had a rough lobby, just make sure you wait and look at those problem players in the tab of the social on the far left so that we can make sure that we get a new game without those players in it. And the final thing is that you really have to start playing as soon as you can at the start of the season if you are truly looking to climb to avoid those Smurfs, people. When it comes to the practical sides of things, we really need to make sure that we're warming up before we play, that we lock in our character and focus from game to game, and finally, think about what we are going to do with the ultimates we have, with what the enemies have, and be really on board with what we're trying to do before we start every single fight. If everything we just talked about is something you truly think about and that you have mastered, ask yourself how you can play your character to perfectly suit your composition and counter the enemy's composition. And with all of this knowledge, we are golden and set up to really climb to the highest heights in ranked. With all of these tips, ranked becomes a very simple experience. So lock in, don't waste any time, queue up, and tell me how it goes in our Discord or in the comments down below. Thank you guys all so much for watching, but until next time, I've got to peace out and Paz out. I'll see you in the next one.